in a serene neighborhood where aging oak trees stood like wise elders and vibrant flower gardens painted the streets with color. Clara Johnson's modest, well-kept home radiated warmth like a lighthouse in the night. Clara, a retired schoolteacher in her 70s, had become the heart and soul of her community. Revered for her kindness, she spent many evenings on her porch, greeting neighbors with an unwavering smile that could light up even the darkest days. She offered words of wisdom or shared homemade treats with anyone who needed comfort. Her life was peaceful, respected, and deeply rooted in love for her neighbors, her town, and the simple joys of existence. But one fateful evening, that peace was shattered like glass under the weight of oppression. Officer Brad Taylor, infamous for his heavy-handed policing tactics and openly racist remarks, prowled through the area. His reputation loomed large. He was a man who wielded authority not as a shield to protect, but as a weapon to intimidate. Minorities in the neighborhood knew all too well the sting of his hostility. That night, his gaze locked onto Clara as she sat peacefully on her porch, a woman whose very presence seemed to offend him simply because it represented dignity, grace, and resilience. Taylor approached her home under the pretense of a routine patrol, though his body language screamed malice. Standing at the foot of her steps, one hand resting ominously on his holstered weapon, he barked, "What are you doing out here?" Clara, no stranger to standing firm in the face of adversity, responded with quiet strength. "I live here, officer," she said, her voice steady and polite. "Is there a problem?" Her calmness only fueled his aggression. He accused her of acting suspiciously and demanded to search her property. Clara, refusing to let fear dictate her actions, reminded him of her rights enshrined in law, and asked if he had a warrant. This assertion of autonomy ignited something ugly within Taylor. What began as a verbal confrontation quickly spiraled into violence. With shocking brutality, Taylor grabbed Clara, throwing her fragile frame to the ground despite her cries for help. Neighbors watched in horror, shouting protests from their yards, but their voices were drowned out by Taylor's threats. By the time he left, Clara lay bruised and broken on her porch, tears streaming down her face. Word of the assault spread like wildfire, igniting outrage across the community. Among the first to hear about the incident was Clara's son, Dante Johnson, a formidable civil rights lawyer known for dismantling corrupt systems and fighting for justice. When Dante learned what happened, devastation washed over him, but surprise did not. For years, he'd waged battles against systemic racism and police misconduct, but this time, the victim was his own mother. Determined to right this wrong, Dante flew home that very night, ready to take on the system once again. His arrival breathed new life into the community, sparking hope among those already rallying around Clara. Vigils and rallies sprang up overnight, with signs bearing messages such as justice for Clara and end police brutality. As videos recorded by witnesses surfaced online, showing Taylor's unprovoked attack in chilling detail, national attention followed. The truth became impossible to ignore, yet the police department attempted to downplay the incident, issuing a statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Their dismissive tone only fanned the flames of public fury. Dante, however, was prepared for their evasions. Leveraging his vast legal expertise, he dug deep into Taylor's sordid past, uncovering a trail of complaints, racial profiling, excessive force, abuse of power. Armed with irrefutable evidence, Dante filed a lawsuit against both Taylor and the department, forcing them to confront accountability head-on. Public pressure mounted, and reluctantly, Taylor was placed on temporary leave, a small victory, but not enough. For Dante, this fight wasn't just about seeking justice for his mother. It was about dismantling the structures that allowed men like Taylor to operate with impunity. It was about ensuring that no other family would have to endure the pain his had suffered. And so, with relentless determination, Dante pressed forward, turning tragedy into a catalyst for change. Despite this modest triumph, the battle was far from over. Clara's wounds ran deep, both physical and emotional, and the community remained tense, bracing for what lay ahead. But with Dante at the helm, they found hope in his unyielding determination. Taylor's reign of unchecked authority was waning, and the seeds of justice had taken root. Dante Johnson was no stranger to courtroom warfare, but this fight struck a chord that resonated deeply within him. It was personal. His opening salvo came in the form of a civil lawsuit targeting not only Officer Brad Taylor, but also the police department itself. Every damning detail emerged. Taylor's sordid history of misconduct, the chilling footage of Clara's assault, all laid bare for the world to see. Dante ensured transparency, using media outlets as a megaphone to amplify the truth. He didn't just expose Taylor's actions. He shone a light on the systemic decay, enabling officers like him to operate with impunity. The headlines blazed across newsstands nationwide. Elderly woman assaulted on her porch. Lawyer's son fights back. Racial injustice under scrutiny once more. Grainy cell phone footage of Clara's brutal attack replayed endlessly, while Dante appeared on every platform willing to host him. His voice carried conviction, his tone unwavering as he called for accountability and sweeping reform. "This isn't just about my mother," he declared during one interview. "It's about every family forced into silence while those sworn to protect us abuse their power." The outrage transformed into a tidal wave of activism. Dante organized town halls, partnering with civil rights organizations to galvanize support from activists and politicians alike. Protesters flooded city streets across the country, demanding justice for Clara and an end to police brutality. As public pressure mounted, investigations unearthed a disturbing pattern of abuse linked to Taylor. Victims came forward in droves, recounting stories of unlawful stops, intimidation, and violence. Each account painted a grim portrait of a man who wielded his badge as a weapon of oppression. Dante's team painstakingly documented each story, assembling an irrefutable case that could no longer be ignored. The tipping point arrived when a former colleague of Taylor stepped forward, confirming the department's long-standing awareness of his behavior. With mounting evidence and relentless public scrutiny, the district attorney had no choice but to file criminal charges against Taylor for assault and abuse of power, a move unprecedented in its implications for law enforcement accountability. Meanwhile, Clara's recovery became a beacon of resilience for the community. Though her bruises faded with time, the emotional scars lingered. Fear and distrust shadowed her days, leaving her hesitant even to sit on her cherished porch. Yet Clara refused to yield. With her son and neighbors by her side, she began to embrace her vulnerability as a source of strength. Her courage inspired others, igniting a groundswell of support. Schools invited her to speak, and children listened wide-eyed as she recounted her journey of survival and hope. Clara's story became a rallying cry, proving that even in the face of cruelty, the human spirit can triumph. By the end, Officer Brad Taylor's name had become synonymous with disgrace. Stripped of his badge and sentenced to prison, his legacy was one of infamy. Clara, forever changed, stood taller than ever, knowing her pain had sparked a fire that could not be extinguished. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters, activists, and community members packed the space, all waiting for justice to prevail. At the center of it all stood Dante Johnson, commanding attention with his presence. His arguments were razor-sharp, his tone resolute, and his evidence irrefutable. Piece by piece, he dismantled Taylor's defense, exposing not only the brutal assault on Clara, but also the entrenched patterns of abuse inflicted upon countless others. Witness after witness took the stand. Former victims, fellow officers, high-ranking officials who had turned a blind eye. Video footage and damning internal records revealed a man who believed himself untouchable. "This isn't just about a badge," Dante proclaimed in his closing argument. "It's about a system that allowed a man like Brad Taylor to terrorize the very people he was sworn to protect. Today, we have the power to say no more." The jury delivered its verdict swiftly, guilty on all counts. assault, abuse of power, and multiple civil rights violations. The judge stripped Taylor of his badge and handed down a lengthy prison sentence. Cheers erupted in the courtroom as Clara, seated in the front row, shed tears of relief. But the victory extended beyond the trial. It sparked a federal investigation into the police department, resulting in sweeping reforms. Anti-bias training, increased accountability, and the termination of officers with histories of misconduct. For the first time in decades, the community glimpsed hope in a system that had long betrayed them. Outside the courthouse, the community gathered to honor Clara. Her bravery had become a symbol of resilience and change. Neighbors, friends, and strangers united to celebrate her strength. During a ceremony held in her honor, the mayor declared it Clara Johnson Day, unveiling a plaque in the community park to commemorate her courage and the movement she inspired. Deeply moved by the outpouring of support, Dante announced the creation of the Clara Johnson Foundation. The organization would combat racial injustice and police brutality, offering legal aid to victims and advocating for systemic change nationwide. Clara, humbled yet resolute, saw it as a way to transform her suffering into purpose. In the final moments, the narrative came full circle. Brad Taylor, now a prisoner, sat alone in his cell, watching a news report about the foundation's launch. On screen, Clara and Dante stood arm in arm, surrounded by cheering supporters. Regret twisted Taylor's face as he realized the magnitude of his downfall. Not only had he lost his freedom, but he had also become a catalyst for change he could never undo. Meanwhile, Clara and Dante celebrated their hard-fought victory at a community block party. Music filled the air, children laughed, and Clara's porch, once a site of pain, became the heart of the festivities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara looked at her son with pride. "We did it," she whispered softly. Dante smiled. "No, Mom, you did it." Clara Johnson's life was irrevocably altered by the events that transpired, yet her spirit remained unyielding. With the establishment of the Clara Johnson Foundation, she emerged as a beacon of resilience and an unwavering advocate for justice. Despite her advanced years, Clara refused to retreat from the fight. She attended events, spoke at forums, and shared her wisdom to steer the foundation's mission with grace and purpose. Her warmth and authenticity made her not only a cherished local figure, but also a nationally revered symbol of hope and determination. The porch where Clara once endured unimaginable pain transformed into a sanctuary of strength and renewal, a place where neighbors gathered to discuss community improvements and future initiatives. Children flocked to hear her stories, inspired by her courage, while the park named in her honor became a hub for youth programs and activism, ensuring her legacy would endure through generations to come. Dante Johnson, invigorated by their hard-won victory, channeled his energy into expanding the foundation's reach. He forged partnerships with civil rights organizations, universities, and legal experts, creating a formidable network of support for victims of injustice. Under his leadership, the foundation launched groundbreaking programs, educating communities about their rights, funding scholarships for aspiring lawyers committed to social justice, and providing legal aid to marginalized groups. But Dante's vision extended further. He championed legislative reforms, advocating for independent oversight boards to address police misconduct. His charisma and expertise positioned him as a leading voice in the national dialogue on racial justice. As his influence grew, Dante began contemplating a run for public office, recognizing the potential to effect even greater change from within the system. The Johnson family's story ignited a renaissance in their community. Inspired by Clara and Dante's relentless pursuit of justice, residents became more engaged in local governance. Neighborhoods once burdened by neglect and systemic inequality saw new initiatives focused on education, housing, and public safety. Young activists rose up, eager to carry forward the torch of justice and equality. Meanwhile, Brad Taylor's fall from grace sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community. His conviction served as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked abuse, prompting departments nationwide to reevaluate their practices. For many officers, it was a wake-up call. Though progress was slow, the reforms Dante championed began to take root, fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. As for Taylor, his time in prison was marked by reflection and isolation, weighed down by the legacy of harm he had left behind. While redemption fell out of reach for him, his downfall became a pivotal moment in the nation's reckoning with systemic racism. The Johnsons' journey became a cornerstone of study in legal and social justice circles. Documentaries, books, and school curriculums celebrated Clara and Dante's resilience, holding them up as examples of how individuals can ignite systemic change. Their story reminded the world that courage in the face of adversity has the power to spark profound transformation. Over time, Clara's name became synonymous with hope, while Dante's tireless work continued to dismantle the structures of oppression. Together, their legacy stood as proof that justice, though hard-fought, was attainable, and that even in the darkest moments, a single act of bravery could illuminate the path for generations to follow.